Hello and welcome to Anadol. So today's class, I'll continue with the IPR 1956. So I already explained to you what is the reason for the government to announce the new industrial policy resolution after the 1948 policy. So if you remember, in the 1948 policy, which was the very first industrial policy resolution announced by the government after attaining independence in 1948, the government made it very clear that we are going to follow the mixed economic pattern of industrial development. That is, both the public and private sector are going to operate side by side. So after that, because of the significant changes in the economic and political changes in the country, the government had to announce new industrial policy resolution in 1956. Okay, so let us see what are all the main features of IPR 1956. Features of IPR. So in this IPR 1956, industries were classified into three categories. So if you remember, in 1948 policy, the industries were divided into four categories. But now in 1956, they were modified and industries were divided into three categories. So the first category is something Schedule A. So this, whatever the industries that are included in Schedule A, so they have to be the exclusive responsibility of state, that is the government. Exclusive responsibility of state. Okay. Exclusive responsibility of state. So in this category, 17 industries is a very, very important one, because even today, when it is referred, how many industries are owned by the public sector, how many industries are owned by the government as of today, always it is referred that from 17 industries of 1956, now only this many industries are owned by the public sector. So this very, very important. Once upon a time means from 1956 onwards, more and more industries were under the control of the government. So 17 industries were exclusively owned by the government. Okay. So 17 industries are included in this category, which are to be exclusively owned by the government. Actually, all those 17 industries, whatever the industries that were in the first and second category of 1948 policy. So all those, both those categories are included in the Schedule A, 17 industries in the 1956 policy. So owned by the government. All those first and second categories of industries of 1948 policy are put in Schedule A of 1956 policy, which are to be owned only by the government. Okay, so that is the Schedule A. Then the second category is Schedule B. So in Schedule B, it is progressively state owned. So progressively state owned. So under this category, 12 industries are categorized. So 12 industries are included in this category, which are to be progressively means gradually it will be these units will be taken over from the private sector. Okay, So progressively, not at a time, over a period of time, those units from the private sector will be taken over by the government. So whatever the industries that are classified in the third category of 1948 policy, we had 18 industries, isn't it? From that 18 industries, which are to be, I mean, in 1948 policy, both the public and private sector can operate side by side of all those 18 industries. So from those 18 industries, gradually it will be taken over by the government, that is 12 industries. Progressively, this is gradually. State owned. But whatever the industries, as long as it is in the private sector, they have to be under the rule and the control of the government. But private enterprises is expected to supplement the efforts of the government. So they have to be supportive to whatever the aims and policies of the government. So they have to supplement the, I mean, meaning they cannot have their own policy of their own. And I mean, in fixing the market, in fixing the prices, in getting the foreign capital. So all those things all are according to the government rules and regulation. So in supplement the efforts of the state in these fields. So this is the, out of the three categories, this is the second category. And then moving on to the third category of industries, that is Schedule C. So in Schedule C, all the other industries which are not mentioned in the Schedule A and Schedule B. So all the other industries, so all the other industries had been left to the private sector, had been left to the initiative and enterprise of private sector. So Schedule A, exclusively state-owned, 17 industries were included in that, which are to be exclusively owned only by the monopoly of the state. Schedule B, 12 industries were included in that. So progressively state-owned, government will gradually take over these industries and the private sector has to play the supplementary role to the government. Then Schedule C, all the remaining industries can be taken over by the private sector, which are not included in Schedule A and the Schedule B. Okay. Apart from the categorization of industries like this, the other there are certain other features were also mentioned in the 1956 policy. So that one is assistance to private sector. So the government recognized that private sector has to support the government in running the industries. So in order to enable the private sector to operate smoothly, whatever the assistances required by the private sector, all those assistances will be provided by the government. See, basically, it's infrastructure. So whatever the infrastructure in this form of power, transport, and also the financial support. So all those assistances will be provided by the government to the private sector. So it is not possible for the private sector to develop the infrastructure. They need all the power, transport, all those facilities are required by the private sector, and they can't do that on their own. So all those major facilities will be provided by the government, and also in the area of finance also, whatever the assistance required, the banks and other financial institutions will be advised, guided, instructed by the government to provide the required financial assistance to the private sector. Basically, whatever the assistance is required by the private sector will be provided by the government. So that is the next feature. The private sector would be assisted in the form of financial support and also by providing the required infrastructure. Like power, transport facilities. So all those will be provided by the government so that they can run their enterprises smoothly. Okay. Then the next is the government also recognized the role of small scale and cottage industries, because see the second 5-year plan, if it was an industrial plan, the two heavy industries. So if the government is going to concentrate on in the development of heavy industries under the public sector, it will be affecting greatly the employment opportunities in the country, isn't it? Because heavy industries, they are all more mechanized. So there will be too much of unemployment in the country because of the concentration of heavy industries, that too under the public sector. So in order to compensate that, the government recognized side by side, the government has to provide, or more role has to be given to the small scale and cottage industries also in the country, because small scale and cottage industries, they generate a huge amount of employment. So whatever the displacement of labor force caused by the establishment of heavy industries under the public sector will be offset by developing the small scale and cottage industries in the country. So in order to do that, the government is going to provide, the government has decided to provide whatever the assistances required even to the small scale and cottage industries. Apart from the private sector, the government has decided to provide all the assistances even to the small scale and cottage industries. Okay. So since the small scale industries, small scale industries including the cottage industries, since the small scale industries can create large employment opportunities. So what the government decided? The government decided they would be encouraged. So small scale and cottage industries, they would be encouraged. How the government is encouraging? Through one is tax concessions. So providing the tax reliefs to the small industrial products and also giving subsidies to the small scale industry. They will be getting concessions when they are obtaining loans from the banks, and they will be getting subsidized when they are getting the, for example, land to establish their units. So like that, different kinds of assistances were provided by the government to the small scale and cottage industries. This is mainly to encourage them to develop their units so that the employment opportunities in the country will not be compromised. Okay. Then the next major feature of the 1956 policy is balanced industrial growth among various regions. So if you remember the objectives of industrial policy resolutions, we have seen that one of the objectives is to have the balanced regional growth, isn't it? So all those have to be included when the government is actually implementing the industrial policy resolutions and developing the industries accordingly. Okay. So meaning what? Industries have to be developed in the backward regions. So that's the reason in the second 5-year plan, the 3 major iron and steel industries were established under the public sector. One in Bihar, one in Rourkela, and then another one in Durgapur. All those were Orissa and all. So all those were backward areas. So mainly in order to develop those backward areas, the government established the heavy industries under the public sector in the backward regions. And at the same time, the government was, was giving all the assistances to the private sector if they are coming forward to establish their units in the backward areas also. So that there will be balanced industrial growth among the various regions in the country. Okay. So this is mainly to correct the regional imbalances in the country. So in order to correct the regional imbalances, so what the government did, the public sector units would be established in the backward areas. So in 1956, the policy stated that, and accordingly, as I mentioned, the government established the three major public sector units in the iron and steel industries in the backward areas. So in the backward areas. And apart from that, also, the state would provide all the incentives such as tax concessions, subsidized loans, etc. to the private sector so that they will come forward to establish their units in the backward areas to start their industries in backward area. So that then there will have the balanced regional development will be there in the country. So that is the next feature of 1956 policy. Okay. Then apart from that, what is the role of foreign capital? See, we are talking about at this point of time, that is in 1956, we are talking about the establishment of heavy industries, which requires huge amount of capital. And neither the public sector nor the private sector were having that much amount of foreign capital. That much amount of capital, sorry. So in order to meet the required amount of capital, it was necessary to attract foreign capital also. So the government recognized the importance of having the foreign capital. India cannot develop industrially without any assistance from the foreign countries. The government has understood that point. But what is the role of foreign capital? Meaning, to what extent the government has to allow the foreign capital or foreign investment. So it was decided that wherever it is necessary, the government will allow the foreign capital or foreign investment, but then the major percentage should be owned only by the Indians. That means what? 51% of the share capital should be owned only by the Indians. Maximum, the government can allow foreign capital only to the extent of 49%. So only to the 49% is allowed maximum. Maximum only 49% is allowed for the foreign capital. The remaining 51% is only the domestic capital. So that the domestic entrepreneurs, they will have the major voice in the industrial development of the country. Okay, so that was decided about the role of foreign capital. Okay. So from 1956 till 1991, India was following that policy. More than 49% was not, of foreign capital was not allowed by the country. Okay. So though IPR 1956 recognized the role of foreign capital. It made it clear that major share in management, ownership, and control should be in the hands of Indians. So that can happen only if the major percentage of the shareholding by the domestic entrepreneur. So that is 51%. So in the hands of Indians. Okay. So that was decided about the role of capital. And then the next feature is, the sixth one is the development of managerial and technical cadre. So we are talking about the heavy industries which requires sophisticated technology. So for that, efficient technical manpower is required. And we are talking about the large heavy industry, that's a large scale industry. So efficient managers should also be there. Then only the industries can run properly, can run smoothly. So in order to meet this requirement, so there should be a required amount of qualified staff in the industries. So in order to do that, the government was prepared to establish several training centers to train all the train the staff in different managerial and the technical roles. So that is the development of managerial and technical cadre. Okay. So the policy also recognized the need for the development of proper technical and managerial cadres as it is essential for rapid industrialization. So this is by providing the proper required amount of training facilities to have the proper technical and managerial personnel in the industries of the country. Okay. And then the last one is about the role of labor force, or what are all the incentives, what are all the facilities the government has given to the labor force in the country. So incentives to the labor. So at this point of time, the government, what is the, of course, the minimum wage acts was already, was included, was passed in 1948 only. And apart from that, the industrial disputes, what are all the working conditions? So they have to be, the working conditions of the labor and all should be proper, isn't it? Then only they will be willing to, they will be having the incentive to work efficiently. So all those rules and regulations which are facilitating the laborers to work properly, all those were framed during this point of time. That is, all those provisions were made in the IPR 1956 policy. So the IPR 1956 recognized another area. It recognized about the role of labor, recognize the need for improving the one is working conditions of labor, because till then it was the private sector, they were all exploiting the capitalistic form of system, isn't it? Before, with the private sector means it is like capitalistic system. So they were all exploiting the labor. So the government recognized that there should be proper working conditions for the labor, and all this, the private sector, the workers should not be exploited by the management. All those rules were framed by the government. Okay, so labor to be treated as partner. So joint consultation and association with the management is suggested. So the other day, when I was explaining about the suggestions to improve the industrial production in the country, so this point was explained, isn't it? About the government passing the Industrial Dispute Act and workers' participation in managerial decisions. All those were included. I mean, starting from the 1948 and more stressed in the 1956 policy. So discouraging the family-oriented business. So joint consultation and association with the labor participation and association with the management. All those were encouraged and all those were clearly specified in the 1956 policy. Suggested. Okay, so these were all the main features of the IPR 1956. So conclusion, see, there was some kind of criticisms were there, like too much critics point out that too much importance was given to the public sector without knowing about their capacity, because all the heavy industries were under the control of the public sector, which required huge amount of technology and huge amount of capital. So that much of capacity was not there with the government, but that much of capacity was not there with the public sector. But without realizing that, it was pointed out that the government had given too much of importance to the public sector. So that was one of the major criticisms leveled against IPR 1956 policy. But in spite of that, as whatever the industrial development India has achieved today is mainly because of the IPR 1956 policy. So based on this policy, India got a strong industrial foundation. So which was done because of the huge role assigned to the public sector. So that's why even today, this policy is considered to be one of the most important policies, or it was also considered as the economic constitution of India. So that's why you can conclude that in spite of several criticisms, so that's 17 industries which were Schedule A, which was taken over by the public sector. That was the main reason for having the reasonable amount of industrial foundation in our country. So that's why this policy is very, very important. So IPR 1956 laid the foundation for rapid industrialization in India. So that's why it is rightly, let me move on to the next page. So it is rightly described even today. Rightly described even, so rightly described even today as the economic constitution of India. Okay, so this is that's why even today IPR 1956 is one of the major industrial policy that brought a very good turning point in the industrialization of the country. And periodically according to the changes in the government, according to the changes in the economic scenario of the country, the government periodically keeps on announcing the industrial policy resolutions. So the next different kind of industrial policy or important significant change made in the pattern of industrialization was announced by the Janata government in 1977. So that is the IPR 1977 policy, which I will explain to you in the next class. Okay. So hope you have understood what is the meaning of industrial policy resolution and what is the necessity for the government to announce the IPR and how the industrial policy resolution shaped the pattern of industrialization in our country. Okay. So if you find this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe. Okay. So until my next class, take care. Bye-bye.